Hello and welcome everybody to this XTB live news video. My name is Walid Koudmani, market analyst for XTB. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the main events happening in the markets in this first trading session of the week, today, Monday, the 28th of June. What we can expect from the US session, what we can look forward to during the rest of the week. We have a busy week coming ahead with the NFP on Friday, the OPEC meeting on Thursday. So not much today on the macroeconomic point of view and not on the economic calendar, but I'm going to be showing you the charts as well, taking a look at some key levels and some important movements that we were seeing in the markets lately. So let's start with a recap of what's happening in this first trading session of the week. So we had Asian stocks trading slightly lower, with the Nikkei and Kospi dropping by around 0.2%. And then we had a slow start to the European session today as a result of that, or echoing that as well, with the DAX pulling back slightly. And yeah, we are seeing that negative sentiment persist in the markets for the time being. At the same time, we also have today some central banker speeches. So those have been a topic of interest for many traders and many investors, as you can see most recently with central bankers and especially FOMC members moving markets just with remarks about tapering or any sort of fiscal policy change. So traditionally, maybe not the most intense day, but these days in particular, the central bankers tend to have more importance than they normally would, because the markets are so reliant upon the current market conditions, and so any sort of hint as to a change could then impact markets, or that's what we're seeing. So we have Fed members, ECB members today, so those are worth keeping an eye in the afternoon between 1 to 6 p.m. US or UK time, sorry. Besides that, as I mentioned, later down the line in the week, we have Thursday OPEC meeting. So oil prices are very interesting to follow these days. You can see the moves that are happening in that. And a large part of the oil price issue, of course, comes down to supply and demand, as we have seen with the balance of oversupply, undersupply, depending on the situation with the economies and the lockdowns at the moment. Demand prospects seem to be improving, so it's going to be interesting to see what they decide. More than likely, it's going to be decided, or the expectations are for an increase in production. So that's going to be interesting, because we also have the Iran deal happening on the side, which could bring more production. We have voluntary cuts ending, plus we have several other issues as well impacting production on supply and demand sides as well. And of course, the NFP first Friday of every month. So we're still in June, but by the end of the week, it'll be July. And so the first Friday of July, we have the NFP report showing the increase or decrease in employment in the US. So heavier during the later part of the week. Today, not so much, but we still have some moves. So let's take a look at some moves as we do. Usually we start with the DAX. DAX, which, as I mentioned, after starting slightly higher, pulled back, but still remains in this area and remains very close to the high recently tested. You can see quite close also to the all-time high, but not as much as we were in the past, especially after this huge drop that we saw towards the end about 10 days ago. So you saw this dropping it to 15,259, the lowest level since May, as we talked about in the previous videos. And then we had this recovery with the test of the upper limit, and now we are trading in this very interesting range here, as you can see, quite wide, but the upper limit has been tested several times, and we are making at the moment some higher highs, with the index testing all three moving averages, 8, 21, and 50, and remaining above basically all three of them for the time being. So interesting to see. We have some news to keep an eye on from that end, so that's going to be interesting to see as well. US indices, on the other hand, starting the day slightly sideways. This is the red and blue candles are the red and green candles are the S&P, so US 500. As you can see, still very, very close to its all-time high, which it reached recently after this upward move. As you can see, we had some periods of upward move, consolidation in a range, and then a continuation of the upward move. Currently, still heading very, very close, in fact, much closer than the DAX to its all-time high, as you can see. 4,273 points, 4,278. Today's open is going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen with these indices as well. The Nasdaq, on the other hand, similar situation, which is interesting because in the past we've seen that the Nasdaq is actually lagging behind the S&P, or at least it has been when we've checked it. At the moment, actually, same or similar situation. Nasdaq very, very close to its all-time high, about 0.3%, 14,381 points to 14,420 points roughly. But yes, so both indices, US indices, starting the day sideways or very close to their all-time highs, while the DAX is actually quite further away, as you can see. And then we can actually calculate that with the platform, about 1.25%. So about 1% more than the other indices. And it's going to be interesting to see. Also, the RSI is moving up higher, interestingly enough, for the DAX and for the US indices, also above 70 at the moment. So slightly overbought. Traditionally, you would count that for US 100. When it comes to commodities, gold, which has had some very interesting times lately, as you can see, this downward move that basically canceled or erased this whole upward move leading up to $1,900 again, which we saw just recently towards the end of May and beginning of June, and was unable to remain at that level. We also saw the huge dollar increase, so dollar strength increase, which pressured precious metals and other things, and that was also as a result of the key central banker speeches that I've been mentioning lately. So at the moment, if we want to take a look at it on the daily chart, we can see we are trading in a very narrow range, which in fact is quite similar to the range we had in the past. So towards the end or second part of April. And we haven't been there since then. And of course, at the moment, we can see we have tested the lower limit several times, also the upper limit at times. But it's going to be interesting to see how this progresses, especially with so much of it being related to the dollar and what's happening with the dollar and the central banks because of that. So the dollar is obviously more controlled by the central banks rather than gold, but gold then tends to have an effect or be affected by the results on the dollar. So at the moment, 1775, this area seems to be, an area we mentioned quite often, it seems, where it ranges in this level of 1775, which tends to be a psychological level under 1800. But as you can see, if we break it down on the hourly chart, you can see that the range is actually not as narrow as it seems, but still narrowing. So you can see that at the beginning it actually started as a lot wider, and then it's starting to narrow, it seems, but it's still quite similar move sizes. You can see as this one's slightly smaller or slightly bigger, but very, very similar to each other. So at the moment, heading towards the lower limit. Going to be interesting to see if this holds as a support once again. If it does, perhaps we're staying in the range. If not, perhaps we can keep an eye out on the top limit as well, because it acted as a resistance several times. So it's going to be interesting to see if it actually does even manage. Also still trading below the Ichimoku cloud on the H1, so worth keeping an eye on. RSI still at 40 though. Oil, which we mentioned this week, we have the OPEC meeting. WTI starting the day pulling back slightly after trying to extend the upward move, but still very, very high levels for WTI, around $73, $74, while Brent moving around $75. So the spread, we've mentioned this in the past, has been narrowing. The difference between the WTI and the Brent, so the oil prices we would have seen maybe in the past where Brent maybe was 60 while WTI was 55 or something like that. At the moment, you can see 75.8 for Brent, 73 point, so $1.20 difference at the moment for between the two. And we are seeing, obviously, this week is going to be very important for both the prices of them as we continue with the negotiations with Iran. The US does, of course. And we have the OPEC meeting on Thursday, which is going to be interesting to see if they do, in fact, decide to increase the production. And besides that, we can take a look at Bitcoin very quickly. Bitcoin, which pulled back, but managed to hold after some news from Mexico, where it seems like Mexico might be interested, or one of the bankers in Mexico, let's say, is interested in accepting Bitcoin as tender. So that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on from a fundamental point of view. But when it comes to the fiat currencies, let's take a look at the market analysis section of the platform with the heat map and see that US dollar is actually one of the best performing currencies today, as you can see with the pound. Pound also very good performance, and the euro is slightly more mixed, while these other currencies are slightly lower on the end. But we can see on the pairs, we can see that pound USD stabilizing around 139, which we saw the drop obviously to reach a low 138.5 not too long ago. And we also saw the recent high up at 140. So we are seeing this move in between ranges, but a large part of it we saw was due to the strength of the dollar that really benefited from the comments made by the Fed members. On the other hand, we have Euro USD, which is back around 119. So we saw Euro USD at 120. And in fact, you can see here, beginning to middle of June, we were trading around 121 for quite some time, 122 even, and then the huge drop to 118.4 just last week, so the last video we did, and then we saw this recovery and now in a range between 119 and let's say 119.6. We can draw some horizontal lines this way. So yeah, 119, 119.7, but at the same time, we are seeing strength of the dollar and some weakness from the euro, although the euro is attempting to recover, and central banker speeches are always important for these two. So as far as currencies go, the dollar is benefiting. You can see the USD index here, and you can see the Euro USD pair pulling back. And so it's going to be an interesting week. Not much today from a macroeconomic point of view, but you see a lot of moves on the charts, especially heading after the weekend. Some news to follow during the week. We'll be back with more updates. Of course, we'll be back with more videos. If you enjoyed this one, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you very much for following. And we'll see you towards the end of the week with the next video, where we're going to update you on what's happening in the markets, what's happened since today, and what to keep an eye on further. So thank you very much, and good luck with your trading.